Good morning. Today I have got a really beautiful but thoroughly obscure book with a thoroughly obscure author for you. I don't think many non-Australians will have heard about this book, and while I know one or two on the booktubes, I don't think too many people will ever have heard about Rynosseros. Rynosseros by Terry Dowling. Terry Dowling is an Australian author, and his books were, as far as I know, all published by Australian publishing companies, which is possibly why they're obscure beyond what they deserve. Beautifully written, but Australian publishing companies, worse more, were niche. A bit about the book. It's got this amazing hyper-realistic wraparound cover, and I don't know if you can see the detail. It was painted by Nick Stathopoulos, an artist who I believe is still going today. And you can only, it looks as if I've smudged it, but in actual fact the black parts of this cover have got star constellations lightly factored in. Great book. Not the original printing. The original printing was from a printing company called Orion. Was it Orion? Which no longer exists as far as I could tell. And this copy, which was published in 2003, was published by Mirrordance. If they exist, I can't find them on the internet. Their website returns nothing. I would love to own more Terry Dowling. I only have half a dozen. He's very hard to get. If you see them anywhere, they're hard to get. This one is also a signed copy, which I'm grateful for. And I sort of treat it with kid gloves because I know how hard they are to find. Okay, Terry Dowling was born in the 40s in Australia. He's got a Bachelor of Arts in Literature and I believe Archaeology, and he did a Master of Arts in English Literature. His writing reflects that. His writing is spectacularly beautiful. And this book is comprised of 8, I think, stories. Yep. 8 stories with 226 pages and little illustrations throughout versions of a rhinoceros. Despite that, it isn't a fast book to read and it isn't an easy book to read. It is thoroughly worth it. It is beautiful. I love it. I try not to reread them too often because they are limited resource. Not fast reading. So the first story is the titular one, Rynosseros. And one has to read it with a sort of like you'd read poetry to begin with. Terry Dowling doesn't over-explain his worlds at all. So if you read William Gibson's Neuromancer and you thought, I don't know what's happening, here that will be too. You have to read it, let it flow over you, and slowly and organically you will understand the world. It will become real and descriptive to you. By the end of it, like myself, you may well be wishing that you could dive into this alternative universe. This is very much an alternative universe. Because of this style of writing, it can be a little bit hard to describe, but essentially all of these stories are written in an alternative Australia that is also a future Australia. We've got an Australia entirely different from any demographic that we have today. It seems like fossil fuels were never invented. It seems like while Europeans came to Australia, the Aboriginal tribes retained a huge amount of power and influence in the centre of Australia. They have a very high tech level, they have a very high biological technology level, and they control the interiors whilst maintaining a tribal power, and they have a Dreamtime element. This book has got so much Australiana in it. You've got the Dreamtime, you've got Aboriginal mythic creatures like the Cootamundra or the Kurdaicha. You've got a formalized type of sorcery. The pointing of the bones and the clever men are represented here. There is so much that has been borrowed from Australian Aboriginal traditions and brought into this future alt universe. And I am there for it. Absolutely. It is great. So the technology in here is way, way ahead of the 2020s even, let alone of the 2090s. I think it was first published in the 1980s. But it's strange, and because it's so lightly described, you need to take it as it comes. This first story, Rynosseros, is narrated by an actual piece of technology, a road sign. These road signs are AIs, and this particular road sign has an agenda which we learn slowly and organically throughout. The ending of this story is surprising, and by the time you reach it, you've got so much information and so much experience of this story that it could well have been a full novel, for all the fact that it's quite short. It took me as long to read as a full novel would have, and if you've noticed that I read rather fast, that is saying something. So while this is narrated by a road sign, or what they call it, a totem pole. These totem poles are AI, but they're road markers, and they serve the purposes of the Aboriginal tribes and the formalized civilization which controls the centre and all the roads. The sand ships, such as Rynosseros itself, are given authority or permits to travel some roads, but it's very, very rare for anyone to be given permits to travel all roads all times, and that is integral to this story. So while our totem pole is telling the story, our main protagonist is Tom. We learn that Tom has come out of a madhouse, though we're never entirely certain what this madhouse is or how he got there or why. Actual mental instability does not seem to be part of this madhouse in any way. It's never really explained. We know that in this madhouse, machines give people illusions, and that he was there for quite a long time. Once Tom emerged from the madhouse, he went to this lottery auction place where he won the sand ship Rynosseros. And so he's a brand new captain. He's got no experience captaining that we know of. And because no terms are explained and the background is so light, you just have to go along with it, as I already said. We are left to wonder often whether this world is somewhere that Terry Dowling envisaged Australia going, or whether it's entirely alternative universe from start to finish. Having finished this book, I lean towards the entirely alternative universe, but I think you could argue it either way. If you've read it, by all means argue it. So, the road marker, the totem pole, the supercomputer with two cold minds. Cold minds and cold people are a narration throughout the book. They are people who have died. Now, in this case, these people who had died were considered valuable enough that their brains were incorporated into the totem pole, and it's possible that the totem pole has gone rogue because he has incorporated these two human dead minds so completely. What exactly the road marker's agenda is not clearly explained until quite late, but it seems to be centered around saving Sajana. Sajana is a very old woman. She is the original biotechnician who created this totem pole and many other ones. But of all her group of biotechnicians who created these poles, she is the last one alive, and the other ones have been killed by having the bones pointed at them by the clever man of the Kodaicha tribes. Now, Kodaicha is a real Australian myth. It's one of the scary ones. But here the Kodaicha are re-imaged into an actual clan that help control the tribes, regulate what people can do. One isn't sure. But they are as scary here as there. Now, Tom is approached by Sajana on his brand new ship, the Rynosseros, and she is trying to conscript him to become involved with this totem pole. One of the things the totem pole has done, which is completely rogue, is he has created his own set of captains, each one of them named after a colour, and they can go anywhere on the continent. The Abo tribes don't like that, and that is one of the reasons why the Kodaicha are trying to get Sajana to find out what the totem pole is doing. Brief diversion. Terry Dowling has re-imaged a world in which the Aboriginal nations of Australia have ultimate control over the continent where they have always lived. He calls them Abos. Now, in 2024, Abo is a slightly risky word. It's been used pejoratively so long that people listening to this video may not be comfortable with it. But Terry Dowling has used it, he writes it a bit differently too, he's used it as a source of pride, power, and society re-imaging, perhaps. So I'm going to use it too. I hope I'm not going to upset anyone with that, but I'm perfectly willing to discuss that. Anyhow, so the Abrotives have Sajana captive, and they are going to point the bones at her so that she will die in this magical manner, like all her contemporaries have, unless she discovers the agenda of this totem pole. She has chosen Tom. She's trying to talk him into it. And then in this really edgy scene on board the Rynosseros, Tom agrees to go, and she blood bonds him to her rather than to the Kodaicha. The Kodaicha run in to stop this, but it's too late. He has already bonded to her. By bonding him to her, it means that he serves her purposes, even while she serves the purposes of the tribes, but the tribes can't get Tom to work against her. It's fascinating and convoluted and elaborate. So, having bonded to Sajana, she sends Tom off to this totem pole, and she believes that by giving him a mission, that will help him find the other captains, and the other captains must know what the totem pole is about. He goes to the totem pole for a mission, but the totem pole refuses to give him a mission, and he comes back dejected. Only when he gets back to Sajana and the Kodaicha, he finds out that he has been given a colour blue. He is now the blue captain who can go anywhere on the roads. As it calls it, all roads, all states, coast to coast, of which there are only 5 in total. So the world building is amazing, and the prose with which it is built is lyrical. And I think, based on that first one, anyone who really likes China Melville might like this. But there is a lot of Australiana in there, which is easier in these days with the internet. You can look up Kodaicha, you can look up bone pointing if you haven't heard of it. Anyway, the second story is as brilliant but quite different. So the second one is called The Only Bird in Her Name. And it starts with a very different vibe, I guess, a different scenario. The narrator is not Tom Rynosseros again. The narrator is a reporter called Beth, and she has come to Twilight Beach, which is a town on the edge of the ocean. I think the second or third novel is actually called Twilight Beach. And she is there to cover and report on the hunt for the last living Fogarty. Right there, we've got a whole world-building scenario that is alien to 2024. This hunting party have every year come to Australia from all over the world. I think the leader is South African, to hunt the Fogarty, which is a very difficult beast to hunt. But they believe that they now have the last living one, and they're going to go out and kill it. And it's a hurry, it's a rush job, because legislation is going to come through to protect it any day, but it hasn't yet. So this one, Tom Rynosseros, is also the main protagonist, but the story is told through Beth, and that's a very fascinating balance of experience. As it begins, it feels almost steampunk, because you've got these people meeting on the terrace of what they call the Gaza Hotel in Twilight Beach. You've got a ornithology-style club which want to protect the Fogarty. And they're standing there in Edwardian splendor, brandishing brass binoculars, which they never use, and they're gathering around a samovar. It all feels very elegant and steampunky. Now, once again, Dowling doesn't over-explain, so we learn by increments that this Fogarty animal is a true shapeshifter. So there's the hunting of the snark type effect of it. You're hunting for an animal that can look like anything. Is it intelligent or is it not intelligent? Where is it or where isn't it? And this story also has some really good sword fights in it, which reminded me how good Dowling is at creating a fight scene with all the dynamic movement and all the tension of a real fight without going too graphic. The Only Bird in Her Name has a wonderful ending that I almost didn't see coming, even though I know I've read these books. It was a long time ago. Great ending, worth reading for the ending. A bit shorter than the first one, as you would expect. The third story is The Robot is Running Away from the Trees. In this one, as in every story, the world building is given a few more pieces so that you feel you know it better and better at each stage. Here, Captain Tom is the narrator. I think he stays the narrator for all the rest of them. And he's invited by a friend to come visit his junk shop. And there's a lot of really good dialogue and purpose behind the purpose. So it's a little bit sneaky how he's invited there. During this discussion, we learn out that robots are completely and utterly outlawed. Not only are they outlawed, they are anathema. And AI in general is so heavily regulated to the point that it almost doesn't exist, but it can't exist in human replica form. In this one, we find out how deeply tortured Tom Rynosseros is on the subject of AI, because though he is a decent man, and we by now quite like him quite a bit, he is surprisingly rule-following in many regards. He agrees with the rules against robots. He doesn't want to believe that AI is a real person. He's done in the past and in the future everything to reject the notion that a mechanical man can be real in the same way that an organic person is real. But this belief of his is constantly being challenged in these stories. So The Robot is Running Away from the Trees is basically a question of AI and when sentience becomes sentience. It's not so much about the structure of the robot, it's more about its existence as an individual. The Dreamtime is the law-abiding structure which has outlawed robots, and they've done it for spiritual reasons as well as practical reasons. So when Tom has been invited to this shop, well, he knows that what he should do is basically hand his friend in, but he can't do that because of his internal loyalties. His friend asks him to start talking to the robot, which he initially refuses to do, but eventually does. The robot has named himself Lud, after Luddites. Love that. And there's this long debate about what he wants. And what he wants is to execute a final program. And when Tom asks what program that is, it's a program he's written, which Tom rejects because an AI isn't real and it can't write its own program. Only this one has. And I'm not going to tell you what that program is. You should read it if you can find it and find out for yourself. So it's a very short story, and it is basically about the internal experience of Tom debating AI. But there's something else in it, in that you are still world building here a lot. Okay, the next one is What We Did to the Tiger, where the tiger in question is written as William Blake would have written it. And this is probably the point to mention that this book will appeal more to people who either have read extensively, because there are so many references to so many things in here. William Blake, a 20th century charvolet, boat, whatever. I don't get all the references in here. I get a lot, but I get a lot more than I did 10 years ago. 10 years ago, I loved it because it was also mysterious and I understood nothing. Okay, maybe more like 20 years ago. 10 years ago, I read it again, as got more and loved it as much. And every time you reread it, you will get more references. So the Tiger is a sand ship, and this one is again about artificial intelligence, but this is perhaps a little bit more cyberpunk, in that the captain of the Tiger, Captain Pocock, is a person who's got so much biologue, as he calls it, implants, that he is basically a walking mechanical, biological extension of the ship itself. He can feel the ship in the way that cyberpunk will describe someone feeling things inside the internet. There's actually no end to his body. Where his body ends, the end to his body is where the ship ends. So he senses the ship in an extraordinary way. Now, There's elements to this of the madness of being more than just a human. And it is a story about the dream time. You've got induced madness, you've got destiny, you've got shipwreck. This is one cracking adventure. However, in 2025, I have the power of the internet and I couldn't resist Googling it. So the Tiger is described as a 250-foot passenger Chevrolet, and Tom is riding on it because he's trying to rejoin his ship in, I think, West Australia, but also because it's this beautiful, magical ship that he's always wanted to travel on. The internet tells me that there was an actual 20th century kite-drawn carriage designed by George Pocock, and it is an indicator to the depths of detail Dowling adds to his story structure, and I guess it's also a bit of a tribute to an early adventurer and inventor, which I at least have not heard of. Great story. They're all great stories. They're all of them. Every single one is 10 out of 5. The next one is Spinners. Spinners is set in a ghost town just outside Twilight Beach. It's a short ride out. It's not in one of the Dreamtime controlled areas. It is just outside, and it is on the site of an old what we would call fun fair or carnival. So you've got these haunting descriptions of ghost towers throughout. You've got this carnival with a wrecked carousel and all these things. There's also a clown mouth. This gave me strong St Kilda fun fair vibes. But it's in the middle of the desert and it's been deserted. It was basically some man's folly, and it's been deserted for ages. People go out there occasionally, but there's nothing there. So in this book, Terry starts to strongly incorporate elements from other cultures in a recognizable way. I think he's always done that, but we're seeing this alternative universe Australia, and most of the desert dwellers don't walk around like early Aboriginal tribes did. Instead, they wear jalabias, which is common to the east, where you cover yourself over from the sun. They carry swords, but they're described as katanas, similar to Japanese katanas. But all of this is incorporated into this really fascinating and rich alternative universe. This book also has nods to a couple of Australian cultural things like windmills. I don't know if the rest of the world uses windmills the way that Australia does, but in large portions of the interior you've got a windmill that is the main controlling power, which helps irrigate large stations and so forth. So there's references to Chinese gold seekers. There's a whole heap in this story. But ultimately, it is about one man's dream. This man is a clockmaker. And he has gone out, and Tom discovers that he's gone out and he's basically trying to bring this fun fair carnival to life, but he's doing that, once again, doing something illegal. So once again, Tom is thrown back against his desire to be law-abiding. Someone's doing something illegal, but it's deeply, strongly part of their nature and their desire. Is he going to help? Is he going to hinder? Is he going to report? And by now we know that there's no real chance of completely breaking the law in this world. The tech is so futuristic that the entire interior of Australia is covered by a blanket of satellites that observe and notice any rule breaking and basically burn it out of existence quite fast. Now, I haven't said an awful lot about the writing style. I've said it's beautiful, and it is. I'm going to read a bit because there's no way I could remember this for myself. So this is from the story Spinners. It is page 126 in my volume. Clockmakers go mad, you know, especially the poetic ones. I imagine they work too close to the process of measuring time. They get filled up with the desperation of hours, the relentless transition from one instant to the next. They never seem to be free of that intense awareness. And that is the true beauty of this book, the writing. The writing will suck you in like a work of literature, and along the way you'll have these palaces of alternative universe built in your mind. The next one is Mirage Diver. And, oh no, the next one isn't. The next one is So Much for the Burning Queen. This is a short story. It's the one with the least science. It's the one I was least invested in because it is about an internationally renowned game of chess. This isn't normal chess, this is fire chess. Somehow the pieces are on fire, and as they move past each other on the enormous board, I think it's an enormous board, they can burn each other as well as normal chess. It's also this strange dance between two people who are attracted to each other but have been rivals for years. If you like chess, you'll probably like this more. If you're into stories about sporting events and how they affect people psychologically, you will probably enjoy this more. This might be my least favourite story in this collection, simply because chess, the word chess makes my brain sort of flatline, I'm afraid. One after that is Mirage Diver. And this one I loved, though I think for some people it might not land in the same way that the chess, So Much for the Burning Queen story didn't land for me. This is about a form of art. The Mirage Divers are in this one particular part of the desert, only this one particular part of the desert. They see a mirage, they dive into it, they bring it back and they paint it onto canvas. It's an intensely lucrative art form, and the newest rising star has just done a triptych of 3 buildings and hasn't painted anything since. Someone desperately asks Tom to go out and find what's happening. Mirage divers, we're told, 70% of them go mad and stop painting. So this starts with Tom going to Old Kalgoorlie, so alternative world Kalgoorlie, and I enjoyed that because I've been to the real Kalgoorlie. Amazing desert town, thoroughly worth visiting if you can. It's a complex and complicated story because the Mirage Diver himself doesn't want to talk to Tom and doesn't want to discuss it. No one knows how Mirage diving happens. It's always done by Aboriginal men, but here he arrives in this town and he finds this young girl of mixed Aboriginal and Turkish? Can't remember. Heritage, who is sort of an unofficial water bearer, and she will talk to him. So everything we learn about Mirage diving and what's happening happens through one remove. I saw it as a graceful statement of heritage and belonging, because there's the debate of what makes a person belong to a place or a race. I really like this, and I love probably partly because you've got that underlying art element that really drove it home for me. Next story, Time of the Star. So, we start with an inland sea, and that's a very Australian thing as well, because when the English first moved here, they proposed flooding the centre of Australia and making an inland sea to reduce the aridity. In this one, there is an inland sea, but whether it's a real sea or a salt sea, we're not certain. In that traditional Terry Dowling way, we're not certain. On this inland sea, in complete privacy, clan battles between Aboriginal tribes happen over small insults. They're by way of being a formalized vendetta where things can and can't happen. And Tom is initially approached by someone in Twilight Beach looking at a picture that has been taken illicitly of these battles, because observers aren't allowed. There is... Look, this is a great adventure story. We've got this battle that's going to happen between these fleets, these 2 different tribes. They're fighting over a number of things. They've got a history, but also about one particular bridal choice. The Shiara tribe have a daughter who... Shiara tribe? I think so. Who wants to marry the anonymous son of the other tribe, the Ajaro tribe. The Ajaro tribe have previously been almost wiped out in these battles, and their only champion left is the anonymous son. What happens when you've got a tribe and it's got these sort of rivalries? They take a younger son and they keep him anonymous, so no one knows who he is or what he is, and he can emerge if the rest of his tribe is wiped out to continue the tribal tradition. The anonymous son, or maybe his keeper, approaches Tom on the Rynosseros to convey the anonymous son there safely so that his rival tribe won't know who he is. This story is phenomenally beautiful. Now, you know how if you're watching a movie and you put it on pause and you hop up to make yourself a cup of tea and you come back, while you're making the tea, you've got these images playing on the inside of your eyelids of what has just happened and you're thinking about what's happened. Well, this book is so visually spectacular that I had the same. Put it down, make a cup of tea. I can see those ships drifting over the huge salt plains of Australia. These massive battles between enormous airships that have been forced to reduce the technology to the basic ones. By the way, I never mentioned these sand ships are all driven by kites. The kites aren't the actual, I think some of them have some wind force as well, but mostly what they do is they grab the sunlight and convert that into energy for the sand ship to do all the things it does. So this feels like a very fossil fuel, non-existent alternative world. Anyway, you've got these two huge armadas over the salt flat, and they've got this device that allows any one ship to be replicated many times. So it looks like you've got hundreds of ships, but for every 20 ship, there may be only one ship that's projecting all the others. So the initial passes of the battle are trying to figure out which are real ships, which aren't. And because this salt plain has been used for formalized battles for so long, there are these wrecks sticking out of it. It is visually fantastic. This is a fantastic story. I loved every bit of it. Unconditional love. Unconditional. Now, again, beautiful, rich, literary. This book and this author demand an investment on the part of the reader. You aren't just going to flick your eyes off over it, stuff inputs into your head. You need to become involved in it in order to really enjoy it. And for some people, or for some reading times, that might not be the ideal here. There are times when I just want a crappy book to read and laugh at. That will never be Terry Dowling. He will always ask for your investment of your time and thought, and he will always reward you very richly for doing it. There was a really beautiful part here that I was going to read to you. Ah, yes. At sunset, the fighting stopped. Siakara and the other Neo-Diere watchers around the shore lit bonfires of cane grass to tell the fleets that they must disengage for the day. Very heavily ritualized fighting. It was 40 degrees centigrade and cooling, and around us the land was changing. The dunes along the shore glowed furnace red, antique gold and salmon pink, flashing with flecks of lime and gypsum. In the strong wind, the sand hills fumed at their crests like newly born volcanoes. Cane grass and spinifex along the ridges soughed and rustled, and the sun sank like a vast red dish through a chameleon sky. One moment burnt copper, then a stained, smoky lavender, and finally, before evening fell altogether, a deep and mournful grey, the colour of wounded angels. Whew. Be still my beating heart. So, clearly I adore these books. I love them. I treat them preciously because they're so hard to get. I have not read all of Terry Dowling's work. I've managed to acquire some of them. I've managed to read a few others at libraries, but they're incredibly niche. I would love to own them all. I can't. I've accepted that in my life. That said, who is it not for? This is strong, but often odd and strange. I can't make it any more clear than the fact that Harlan Ellison was a very, very strong advocate for Terry Dowling. If he's known internationally, it's Harlan Ellison who got him there. And let's face it, Harlan Ellison was an odd little person who liked the strange. Terry Dowling provides that strange. I will personally take Terry Dowling's writing over Harlan Ellison's writing any day. I've read a fair bit of Harlan Ellison. I think Dowling is far better than him. I suspect Harlan Ellison knew that too. He may not have admitted it. Who is it not for? Unexplained worlds. If you do not like your world building unexplained, This is not for you. You have to read along and absorb it. And by story 4 or 5, all of a sudden you realize that you know this world. You know it in the depths of your heart. In the same way that I know how to find a polling booth in Australia, you will know this alternative universe. You will know Twilight Beach. You will know what you have to do to get from there to West Australia. But it isn't thrown at you. I feel like a lot of modern speculative fiction readers expect the world to be given to them, handed on a platter, and Dowling doesn't do that. The learning it is part of the enjoyment. So I've mentioned China Melville. If you like those really elaborate, largely obscure world building scenarios, then yes, I think you will like this. If you can't cope with William Gibson's sprawl writing, where you are not given the explanation for how the world works or what the words mean, you may have trouble with this. I think it's still worth trying if you can. But here, like with Neuromancer, you are expected to pick up the world yourself. You're not spoon-fed it. Well, this is alternative universe, futuristic tech, speculative fiction at what I think is one of its best and most beautiful writing styles. It is still more interested in the human experience. If you want to know how the biotech work, you're going to have to imagine it for yourself. However, with those small, I guess, cautions, I would still say Rynosseros by Terry Dowling is something that I would recommend to most of the people that I know, not all, but most of the people I know on BookTube. If you like speculative fiction, if you like alternative universes, it's for you. If you're not actually in any way into speculative fiction or science fiction, but you love beautiful writing, this is for you. If you like light, gentle, but deep explorations of human experiences and visualizations, this is also for you. However, obscure. You learn a little bit more about Tom himself at the end, but largely, this is your experience with the book, and there is no spoon feeding. Okay, this is a really long review. Thank you very much to anyone who is still watching. Read good books. Read Terry Dowling's shopping lists, even if you can find them. I assure you that anything that you read by him will be amazing, whether you like it or not. So, read good books.